I'm here today at one of my absolute favorite places. This is one of the best art museums in the entire world, and you've never heard about it. I'm in the city of Guadalajara in Mexico at a place called Hospicio Cabanas. It used to be an orphanage, but then the Mexican government paid the greatest muralist of all time, Jose Clemente Orozco, to paint his masterpiece inside the chapel. I'm going to give you a guided tour of what I call the Sistine Chapel of the Americas. You're going to see raw emotion, history, conquest, sacrifice, and ultimately, transcendence. Let's go inside. As soon as you pay the $5 entry fee, you step into a beautiful courtyard, one of many courtyards inside this vast structure, and it's facing the chapel that we're going to go into. As we stroll through this courtyard, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Hospicio Cabanas itself. It basically means the Hospice of Cabañas. Cabañas was the benefactor of this huge facility that served as an orphanage and a place where the elderly and sick could go to receive care. Construction began in 1791 and it was completed in 1829. The style is Neoclassical. It's designed by a guy named Manuel Tolsa, and he was a Spanish architect who did other projects in Mexico City. It's one of the most beautiful structures even in Mexico, and that's without including what we're going to see inside the chapel with all the murals. It was designated a World Heritage Site in 1997. We're not going to waste any time today. Now I'm going to take you inside the auspicious chapel itself. I'm going to explain to you each of the 57 murals that master painter Orozco painted. But before I do that, I just want to give you a moment as we enter to enjoy the experience of going into one of the most beautiful chapels in the world, and to have that first impression of this epic art immersion experience that's now almost 100 years old. The subject of these works is men and machines, the real and the symbolic war between the two. The ultimate focal point of today's journey is the ceiling of the cupola, with the Hombre en Llamas, the man in flames, in the solitude of human intelligence. We're going to deep dive into that highlight of this museum towards the end. But just take a few moments now to absorb the space itself. It's breathtaking. Before we get into the individual murals, there's 57 of them, I want to tell you a little bit about why the murals were painted and who painted them. So they were painted in 1937. Remember, this Hospicio Cabanas was completed in 1829. So over 100 years, it served as an orphanage and a hospice. But in 1937, the Mexican government commissioned murals as part of a larger national movement to promote public art and post-revolutionary identity. The chapel space would be perfect for this. It had a massive dome and cross-vaulted ceilings, the absolute perfect place for large-scale frescoes. The painter chosen was named Jose Clemente Orozco. He was one of Mexico's most powerful muralists. He was one of the big three: Diego Rivera, Jose Clemente Orozco, and David Alfaro Siqueiros. You can see one of his greatest works in my video about MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. The commission was funded by the Mexican government through different cultural initiatives, and they really wanted to support this Mexican muralism movement. Orozco was born in 1883 in a place called Ciudad Guzman in the state of Jalisco, not far from Guadalajara. It's the same state. He was known for really dramatic murals that focused on the struggles of humanity, social injustice, and revolutionary themes. He was also known to be a bit darker than Diego Rivera and had a much more emotional and challenging tone. He was very influenced by symbolism, expressionism, different modern art movements, and his experiences during the Mexican Revolution itself, which was still fresh. He also was inspired by the great European Spanish artists El Greco and Goya. Well, El Greco was originally from Greece, but he was considered a Spanish artist. He emulated them in their emotional intensity and their social commentary. You can see in his murals distinct characteristics like expressionist drama, bold contrasts of colors and light and shadow, often that seem almost distorted and tormented figures. This is a thinker's art paradise. He preferred fresco technique and he avoided romanticism. He wanted that raw emotional impact. And it's also important to note that he lost his left hand at the age of 21 messing around with fireworks. On top of that, he had poor eyesight. So this was a visually and physically impaired person that became one of the greatest artists of all time. Take a look around you. Now we're going to deconstruct these murals and enjoy and absorb them one by one, all 57 of these magnificent pieces. You're going to learn more than you could imagine about Mexican history and emotion. Okay, I can barely contain my excitement. I really want to get talking about all of these murals because they each have a life of their own. They're so fun to talk about and experience. So let's just jump in. When you walk in to the chapel, you're walking in from that beautiful courtyard and you're coming in the west entrance. There are 4 entrances to the chapel, light coming in from all the windows, from the cupola, and from all 4 of those entrances usually. And now there are 4 entrances because the chapel's shaped like a cross. Remember, it was actually the functioning chapel for a long time for this orphanage and hospice. So when you walk in through the west entrance, if you turn around and look above you, you are greeted by an Aztec god. Turn around and look up at this. It's just a huge wow. So this god is nicknamed here Huichilobos. Now Orozco himself didn't really name any of these murals. We only have interpretations of artistic scholars and sometimes his children, so we could figure out pretty much by the representation what he meant by things or tales that were told by others. So this is called Huichilobos, which is actually a nickname for an Aztec god Huitzilopochtli, but it also has some of the aspects of the Aztec god Coatlicue, so he was maybe mixing a little bit here. That necklace of teeth, right? And it's got weapons in each hand. If we look towards the bottom of the kind of god statue itself, what do we see? At first I thought it was a baby, but it's not. That's just the perspective. It is a human without a heart who has been sacrificed. Look at the gray clouds kind of forming this scene. This is an incredible fresco. Now, what do you see there to the left of the statue? It's a red receptacle with what in it? Human hearts. And on the right, you see someone who has probably been sacrificed or is about to be sacrificed or is paying homage to this god. So what Orozco is doing here is kind of giving you an introduction to Mexican history and kind of demystifying some of the pre-colonial experience. I think what he's basically saying here is it wasn't this perfect, peaceful place where the Aztecs lived. So how he portrayed it and how much emphasis he put on sacrifice could be considered controversial, but it is absolutely interesting for sure. If you look directly below the Aztec god, you're going to see what are called friars or monks, and next to those monks look like bodies of people that are in some form of torture or possibly death. So what are we supposed to think about here? Well, are we supposed to think about the commonality between the subjugation that the Aztecs did to other tribes and the subjugation that the Friars and the Catholic Church did to the Mexican people? Or are these friars mourning the loss of those dead ones? We really don't know. Again, this is what great art does. It makes you think. Now let's turn our head just a little bit to the right, and you'll see other parts of this theme. You can see like a reddish orange temple. It's probably an Aztec or maybe a Mayan temple. And in front of it are almost cartoonish, ghoulish figures. They're ripping hearts out of people and holding them up right in front of that temple. It's a whole scene in and of itself. You can see almost the cartoonish blood falling down, and you just don't know what to make of it, but you can not in any way escape the reality of Orozco's darkness and depth. Now turn and look to the left, and I don't know how noticeable this is in the video. I'm trying to give you the best idea possible, but these images, the one you just saw and the one you're seeing now to the left, are much smaller than most of the images and murals and frescoes here in the chapel. And I'm wondering if that was intentional. If these were the biggest murals, it would be so disturbing. The one on the left, they are cramming the hearts and the human remains down their throats. You really have to kind of squeeze in with your eyes to see what they're doing, but it is what they're doing, and it's labeled Anthropological Ritual by most experts. Now bring your eyes closer down to ground level, and if you were coming through this west entrance, immediately to your right is just kind of a dedication of some of the work of Orozco. And if you look across from that, something more interesting and less obvious, it's called The City on Fire by most experts. And I really love it. It's a nice work of modern art. Those are flames, but those are almost unrealistic flames. It's really just kind of beautiful to look at. And why? Why is he painting a city on fire? Everything in this museum, in this chapel, ultimately is in some form of transformation. And fire is used a lot, as we'll see in the cupola, to talk about transformation. And we have to decide if that's good or bad. Okay, now let's walk just like we're walking across the transept of the cross inside this chapel, directly to the other side, to the east entrance. This is actually one of my favorite murals in the entire chapel, but it's the most difficult to explain and interpret. Let's take a look up. So directly across from that Aztec god, whether it's Huitzilopochtli or Coatlicue, here we see what has been labeled American religiosity. So I'm going to let you look at it for a second, see what you're seeing there, and talk about what we might be able to agree on, although we probably won't know for sure. So, American religiosity, when you think of American religion, I think what Orozco's trying to do here is talk about how it's a big mishmash of different ideas. It looks kind of like perhaps a figure of Jesus with something like a crown of thorns, maybe other Old Testament figures, white-looking men with beards on the right, being kind of meshed in a kind of jumble with other figures. And some of those other figures are clearly indigenous people, gods, or statues. It just seems like kind of a tangled mishmash. And if you look up into the upper left-hand corner, there's even a leg sticking out. Is that hair? Is it one person's hair coming over a bunch of people? Are the faces all kind of smashed in together? It's a really, really great example of modern art. Remember, the modern art movement was really in full swing in the United States and Europe at this time. The same thing is going on in Mexico. They're very proud of their modern artists, and I think this is a really incredible statement. So go ahead and leave something in the comments if you have a different interpretation here. One person said that they thought it was a woman on the cross instead of Jesus. I'm not seeing a woman on a cross anywhere in here, but I'm open to critiques. To me, this is really fun because you get to really pull it apart if you look at it long enough. Directly below that scene of American religiosity are two pretty straightforward figures. They're called warriors. One of them looks almost like he might be an executioner. So is Orozco kind of making a comment about, is there a difference between a warrior and someone who is just a paid killer? I don't know. There's a beautiful naked man on the right. He also has a sword. His leg has some white on it. That colorization looks almost like he's kind of mixing with the mysticism and with the sky. But these have traditionally been called warriors. What I find particularly interesting about the man, first of all, that he's naked. A naked warrior with a sword like that doesn't really match, so Orozco's playing with something here. But what I really find interesting are both of their faces. You can see the face of the naked warrior much more clearly, and it is not a stoic, standard classical face. I'm looking into the eyes. You can see the furrowed brow. It's not a frown, but is it a sadness? And then, if you look into the eyes of the other warrior who looks almost more like an executioner with that axe over on the left, his eyes are also perhaps a little bit creepy, but maybe also a little bit sad. Now look in those smaller spaces. So mirrored on the opposite side, remember there was human sacrifice and people eating hearts. Here we have a more upbeat scene below the warriors and below the mixing of American religions. On the left, if you're facing it, if you're facing the east there, you see what is called the ritual dance. It almost looks like a little bit of fun. There's someone kind of shaking their booty, and there is another person whose legs are completely in the air. So it looks like a good time, and I don't think he's mocking here. I think he is trying to show motion and movement. What I do find interesting is that red backdrop, that really contrast. So the grays and the whites you can still tell individual figures apart, but they're all the same color, they're all blended, and they're all in union. It's very similar if you look directly across to the right, so over this east entrance, but this one has been labeled religion or the religious. So it's probably some sort of religious experience. It does look indigenous. So, it would be either Aztec or one of the other tribes here in Mexico. I don't know what the person is doing on the ground. It looks almost like a canine face. That might be a mask or it might not be. I don't know. And I don't know what they were going for here. But I particularly like the strokes here. The white strokes really stand out to me because they could be a rib cage. They could be a gluteus muscle. They could be a thigh muscle. It's just really fun. Now, if you look down and to the left, you see a beautiful fresco, and it's called Carabela, which means caravel. If you've seen some of my other videos, I actually traced the path of Columbus. So this is Columbus's caravel, and I love how beautifully here Orozco is having it being pushed forward by the waves. Of course, the waves wouldn't have really been that high. It would have completely drowned the ship. But I think what Orozco is doing, and you actually see it if you look directly across because he painted two caravels, and they're very similar. But if you look to the other side, you see pretty much the same thing. The waves are overpowering and almost crushing the ship, but we know that those ships made it. So is he trying to say that the forces of progress, although they are violent, eventually do move us in a certain direction, even through that violence? I don't know. We can only speculate, but these are beautiful to look at. All right, now we're going to turn from the cross and we're going to go towards what you could call the north end of the chapel. And if you look to the sides, on either side, there's 3 huge frescoes on the left, 3 huge frescoes on the right, and they are at pretty much eye level, but they're huge, they're magnificent. They're one of the best parts of this chapel. Of course, the absolute best parts are on the ceiling, but we haven't got to those yet, but these are still really cool. Directly to the left as you're walking towards this north entrance, it's been called the Unknown. It's a very beautiful mural. There's a woman, perhaps one of the only women you'll see in this entire chapel, and she looks like she's kind of wrapped in a shroud. We don't know who she is. We see a soldier, but we don't see his face. He's coming out of what could be flames, what could be flags. There's just a lot going on here, and it has been generally called the Unknown. It's one of these frescoes that really makes you think and appreciate the beauty at the same time. Right next to that, in the middle, is one of the most famous works here inside the museum, and one of the most eye-catching it always has been for me. It's been called Scientific Appeal, right? But to me, it looks like, I want to call it the Wheel of Progress. Just from a purely aesthetic standpoint, I really love looking at it. Let's talk about how he uses the colors here. So we have so many things going on that are colored in gray, and then at the top, almost as if Like beams from the sun, we have those oranges, yellows, and reds. It's kind of magnificent to look at, but what is that sun? What is emanating all that radiance? And it's a wheel. A wheel represents progress, but here, it looks like progress is crushing things. So we see this very deep, interesting concept in the work of these great Mexican artists, especially Orozco. Is progress helping us, or is it crushing things like books and literature and art? Is it making them obsolete? Is it giving us more distractions? And is it crushing our humanity? Those are human faces. Are those idols, or are they humans? Who is being crushed and what is being destroyed? It's one of the best parts of the entire museum. I don't think that you can really describe the feeling of being inside here the same way you wouldn't be able to really describe the feeling of being inside the Sistine Chapel if you've never been there. But I want to do my best to approximate it for you. We've come a long way with video these days. I want to give you the information and the visuals, but I also want to just share with you a little bit of the emotion that you feel when you see great art like this. I mean, right behind me is an almost life-size wheel. And nobody, no matter how much you understand about art or history, can misunderstand what's going on here, at least to some extent. You have the wheel, which looks mechanical and symbolizes progress. And it's crushing things that look like people, that look like art, that look like culture. They're almost out of focus. And in the same way, the wheel almost looks like the sun. So it makes you question everything. And that's what great art does. It makes you question everything. Does progress mean things will be better? Does it mean things will be worse? Is progress such a dominant force that it's like the sun, and that it is the source of life and the source of death? These are the kind of profound questions that in Mexico they painted in an orphanage. The third panel on the left has been called, what would be the translation in English probably, the Spicy and the Banal. They call it the Banal y Barroco. So, to be honest, I don't know exactly what is going on here, but we can see ornamentation. We can see, I think he might be talking about Baroque, meaning almost when we talk about European art and we think of Baroque as a little bit too fancy sometimes, almost unnecessarily so. Is he merging here kind of Greek, European elements with Aztec or indigenous elements? I can't really tell. He probably is. And is he saying that both of them can be kind of these unnecessary, cluttered-looking adornments? I'm just going to say that this is mostly my interpretation. This is one of the least representative and most difficult to basically come up with an explanation for. So I'm going to allow you to do that on your own, either in this video or sitting there looking at it. They have these wonderful benches where you can sit and look at the ground level, the eye level works, or you can lay down on the benches and look up at the ceiling. We're going to do that in a little bit. So then if you look up right above the north entrance, you're just going to see a beautiful design. It probably has something to do with paper, but nobody knows. Even the tour guide didn't really know. It's never really been labeled. It's very pretty. If you look above that, we pretty much know who these people are because they were very influential to Orozco and influential to all of Mexican and Hispanic art, right? So if you look up on the left, you see a man holding a book. That is Cervantes. Cervantes wrote Don Quixote, what some believe is the first and most important novel ever written in the history of Western literature, not just in the Spanish-speaking world. If you look to the right, it looks kind of like Shakespeare, right? That time period, that ruffly thing around his neck. He's got paintbrushes. That's El Greco. That was one of Orozco's idols, hundreds and hundreds of years before. So art is almost never, well, really never created in a vacuum. We're standing on the giants of the people that came before us. Now, directly above me are those two figures, one of them being El Greco, one of also my favorite painters. He was a Greek painter, but he painted mostly in Spain. They called him El Greco in Spanish. And Jose Clemente Orozco loved him. He was very influenced by him. You can immediately see it. If you look at my video about the Met in New York City, you can see one of the El Grecos, the city of Toledo in Spain. It looks like this. The sky looks like this. Similar colors, similar sense of mysticism and unknown, a little bit possibly eerie, but not quite. That's Orozco. So here we're seeing how Mexican art, which is part of the grander American art, continues the beautiful tradition of European art. Looking down to the right at almost eye level, they're getting a little bit harder to interpret. This one has been called Tragedy. It's a really cool painting. It's hard to say what it means, but it looks like a flying horse. There's spears coming down from its legs. How many people are riding it? How many horses are there? And what is this beast doing over these almost brutalist dwellings on the ground? The next fresco, which is also huge, of course, and part of it at eye level, it kind of continues that city, and instead of that beast with the spears, the horse, flying in the air like a Pegasus above it, now we have a church rising above it. So this panel has been called Religion. All you see here is this imposing church, but the light around it is dark and gloomy. I don't think that Orozco was against religion per se, but it is known that he was a very harsh critic of dogma and hypocrisy. And the last of these 6 panels in this, what you could call the North Wing, has been labeled Conquest. I find it one of the more fascinating panels, but very difficult to explain. It's really hard to imagine what is going on here because there are so many different elements going on. There's definitely some conquest and some war going on. Is that a beautiful tree in the background? Why is there a figure whose heart is the tree and nature above it all? What is the flag? And why are the faces kind of cut off and barely coming through the door? This one is going to really have to be up to a lot of interpretation. Now let's head to the final wing before we start looking up to the ceiling, which is the best part. This is still really cool. So if you start heading towards the south, towards that 4th entrance, the first thing you're going to see on your left is actually Juan Cruz Ruiz de Cabañas himself. So he was the bishop and the benefactor of this whole place. So it was 100 years before or more, but Orozco is paying homage to him here. This one is called Charity, and it looks like this bishop is being kind of benevolent to children, so some of the few female figures that we see here, and perhaps women. I do find it interesting. I don't think his face is painted in the absolute best light, so I think there's some room for us to criticize the benevolence of the Catholic Church a little bit here. Maybe that's what Orozco's doing. I don't know. It just seems like that to me. The face is not kind of just this traditional angelic face. The eyes are a little bit questionable. The next one is called Human Suffering. So this fresco painting is quite interesting. It's all kind of blurred together. It's almost as if the people suffering don't have identities of their own, and they're suffering in their own gray color underneath the colorful new buildings of the colonial empire that went on for hundreds of years in Mexico before the Mexican Revolution. I particularly like that black splash of the garment that is kind of flowing over the cement at the bottom. And the last one on this side, it would be on the left side if you're walking towards the south. The last one is called Demagogues. Right? So these are all these political leaders with their somewhat smiley, seductive faces from different time periods, probably you can tell by the clothes, and they're standing on their pedestals and preaching their political sermons to the people. Now, if you look straight ahead south, you're going to see another one of those beautiful white designs over the doorway. This one looks like it is a sword or something pokey piercing through paper, a common theme, right? The destruction of the arts. It's not something Orozco liked. If you look above it next to that window, you are also going to see up here what has been called conquistadors. But we're getting into something really interesting here, because conquistadors obviously would not have had bolts in their arms. He's merging humans with machines here. Once again, eye level these huge frescoes. If you look to the right, you're going to see one that has been called Dictator. Well, the Dictator is made to look quite funny. It looks like he might have some indigenous garb on, which is interesting. And he's got a very interesting headdress kind of going on. Is perhaps Orozco talking about dictators somewhere else in the world? Is this an indigenous Mexican person, or is this an Asian person? Why is the hair kind of pulled up like that? I really don't know. It's a really beautiful painting, though. The next one, right next to it, is called Militarization. And it looks like just this big jumble of machinery with barbed wire. I particularly like, it looks almost like white sheets kind of going up and blocking our view of something that's going on. And it just looks like threshers or massive industrialization going on, changing everything. And the last one at eye level is called Despotism. And when you look at this one, you can clearly see it's a man with what looks like some form of a whip, and he's got his hand in a fist, and of course he's standing behind barbed wire. And the only thing that's colored is the end of his whip and his boot, because the boot will crush you. All right, these just keep getting better and better. Let's flip our eyes up to this magnificent ceiling. We'll start with the 6 panels before we get into the best part, which is the cupola. The first of these 6 panels, if we're heading south, is called Cortez. Now remember, Cortez was the Spaniard conquistador who conquered Mexico for Spain. And here we have Orozco's version of him, really an awesome sight to look at. He has no heart. It's empty inside. It really looks like the only human part of him may be his face. The rest appears robotic, and there's nuts and bolts. He has a sword, and it's going through the legs of a person on the ground. Someone else is upside down. The legs are almost gone. And on top of Cortez looks almost like a partly mechanical angel, a blonde person looking him directly in the eyes. What a magnificent work of art. The next one is an incredible jumble. It is called Bellicosity. So we're talking about being warlike. And this one is not a single figure. It's a jumble of figures, all kinds of swords and faces and limbs tangled together. It seems to me like Orozco is saying here that this is all that war really is, a big jumbled mess and a waste of humanity. Take a few moments to explore and feel this mural with your eyes. It's a lot of fun. The last of the panels headed in this direction, you're actually heading north, I'm sorry I said south, but we're going north first towards Cervantes and El Greco. And the last of the ceiling panels headed in this direction towards the north side of the chapel is, again, one of my favorites. I probably have like 5 favorite murals in here, and this is just incredible to me. Remember, this was painted around 1937. It was painted by a man with only one hand and limited eyesight. He did do the paintings himself, and he had assistants, but the assistants primarily built the scaffolding, apparently. So look what he did here. The title is actually called The Spain of Charles V. So you can see the Spanish flag and a little coat of arms in the background. But what you mainly see is a horse. It's like a silver and blue horse headed into the fray. But the horse has gears. And my absolute favorite part, the chain for a tail. And I love how he sets that off against that blue background. This is one of those panels that you can lay back and look at and really contemplate and pick apart and feel with your eyes and just enjoy and absorb for as long as you want most of the time, because this is never a really crowded museum. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's now walk towards the south of the chapel. Again, we're looking at these 6 ceiling panels. Not the cupola yet, that's the best part, but these are really rivaling the amazing Man on Fire that you're going to see at the end. So as you're headed south, the first panel that you see when you look up by leaning back or by laying back on one of these awesome, comfortable benches, you see what is called the Franciscan. I love this Franciscan, and you're going to notice right away, the Franciscan parallels Cortez that you saw. They both have a blonde angel looking at them. The difference here is that this blonde angel has like this mechanical hook for a hand, it looks like, and this blonde angel is looking at the back of the Franciscan monk rather than in the eyes. What is that saying? I don't know. The Franciscan here is meant to bring Christianity and literacy. You see the ABCD, and you see he's holding the cross in the hand. But typical of Orozco, nothing is that simple. The cross that he's holding in the hand is extremely sharp on all ends, including at the bottom, and it's right over the neck of the person who is praying at his feet, probably a darker-skinned indigenous Mexican person. What an incredible statement. Next, we're going to go what are called the horses of conquest, and I promise, besides the Man on Fire, this is the last time that I'm going to say this is one of my favorites. I could lay back and look at this one for a really long time. I'm enjoying looking at it even right now as I'm making this video for you. What you see here is a horse with 2 necks and heads, and it's being ridden by a conquistador. Now, of course, we don't know exactly what Orozco meant to convey here, but it's pretty reasonable to assume what was going on, that Orozco wanted us to pretend like we were people that lived in Mexico before the conquest. They did not have horses, okay? So they didn't even understand really visually, contextually yet what they were seeing. In fact, one of the natives was said to have reported when they first saw the Spaniards arriving, ran back and told everyone else, they come with these white beards and they're riding huge deer. So the closest thing they knew to horses was deer. So what Orozco's doing here is saying that what they saw was so incredible and fantastical that it was almost surreal. Then you see this amazing jumble on the right, and on the left, you're seeing again limbs of humans. It looks like the shape of a horse, and mechanism and machine and nuts and bolts. The colors in this one are getting more and more amazing because you're not just seeing 2 colors like you were when you were looking at eye level. When you're looking up, you're seeing way more colors as you lift your eyes towards heaven with greater understanding. You're seeing rich, beautiful, almost aquamarine blues, blood reds, oranges, whites, and grays. And lastly, the beautiful and somber end of the 6 panels that you see when looking directly up. This one is called Philip II of Spain, a king of Spain, nestling his chin so close to that cross. But is that blood on the cross, and whose blood is it? All right, here we go, folks, the absolute best part of the Sistine Chapel of the Americas. We're going to go right to the center of this cross-shaped chapel and look upwards into the cupola. But supporting the cupola, first of all, you see in those spaces where the arches support the cupola, I think they're called pendentives. In those, you see these beautiful figures. They have been called human effort because the human effort is supporting what you'll soon see all the different forms of the arts and the philosophies, which is supporting the intelligence of man. So these beautiful humans inside the pendentives, you can see the musculature of their bodies. This reminds me a little bit of Leonardo da Vinci, but you also see a weapon. And to me, the weapons look almost phallically placed. So there's a lot going on here in terms of subtext that you could spend a lot of time enjoying and thinking about. So once we take a look at the human effort, which is supporting the cupola, we can see on the ring below the finale, we can see many different panels. And these panels represent the arts and the humanities and all of those higher aspects that Orozco believed were part of the human condition. I'm going to start facing west in talking about what these different aspects of arts and cultures and humanities are. So let's take a look at these. Some of these are just awesome. The first one we're going to see actually facing west in the upper left is called aeronavigation, or basically flight. But we actually see what looks like kind of a goblin-like angel falling upside down. I love that he started that off with talking about flight. Remember, when in 1937, when Orozco painted these, flight was a new thing. Most people had never flown before. He obviously sees it as very questionable. The next is called in Spanish La Herrería, which is basically like blacksmithing. It's a cool mural. The next one he calls, or someone has called in art history, the integration of the arts. The next one after that is engineering. After that, you're going to see agriculture, then ceramics, then a human torso, which you're going to see a couple times, and finally, the typographic arts. One interesting thing to point out when you talk about La Agricultura, the agriculture panel, it's pretty fascinating. You got to love Orozco. If you really think about it, you can see that it looks almost like a bound bale of hay or a bunch of strands of hay or some form of wheat or grain bound together. And of course, below it is an upside-down, distraught face. So the consequences of mass agriculture, perhaps. Again, and then the next panel, you're looking at ceramics, La Cerámica. It's a beautiful vase, but it has almost a human, sinewy form to it. And below it are hands, but they look like hands that have been overworked and are full of sorrow. And if you really go deep, you can imagine that it almost looks like hands holding a face. Taking a look at these arts and philosophies and humanities and things that support humans, if you look at it facing the east, you're going to see sculpture, La Escultura. Doesn't look like a whole heck of a lot of fun. Next, you're going to see La Arquitectura, architecture. This looks really bleak. I don't know how much respect Orozco had for architecture based on this panel. Next, you're going to see the integration of the arts, it's been called, and you're going to see a panel called El Teatro, which means theater. This one actually looks like a lot of fun. If you look at the painting, it's a guy popping out, looks pretty nude and in a pretty playful position. He's popping out from behind a curtain. After that, you are going to see the panel for painting, La Pintura, another human torso, and of course, Orozco throws in Pintura Mural, which means mural painting, as a separate art and craft in and of itself. And it's very prominent and very strong in this panel. And lastly, you're going to see navigation. And of course, navigation was important because it changed the world. But what is going on in this panel of navigation? It looks like one of those caravels coming in and a human throwing his hands into the waves in protest. And now we're going to look up beyond all of the arts and crafts and aspects of human civilization. The colors are going to shift. Our mind is going to be opened and we're going to be flooded with light. Let's lean back and look at the center of it all, where the earth ends and the sky should begin, replaced by a dome, where the man burns. Suspended in the cupola of the Hospicio Cabanas, here in Guadalajara, Mexico, surrounded by darkness and the climb of human struggle, Jose Clemente Orozco's Hombre en Llamas, Man on Fire, explodes into view. A human being, ablaze, engulfed in flame, yet untouched by it. His body hovers, levitating, with arms and legs stretched, hands and feet lit like torches. He's both consumed and crowned by the fire. Look closely. From some angles, his limbs twist and move. From others, they straighten. There's no single way to see the man on fire. The image shifts with your position. A living optical illusion, mimicking the way truth itself warps in the fire of time and memory. The flames dance all around him, but they're not wild. They're precise, choreographed, and perhaps even divine. This is not a fire that destroys, but one that purifies, awakens, and transforms. He's not suffering, he's not dying, he's becoming. But this isn't Christ, it's not a saint, and it's not a hero in marble. This is humanity itself, rising out of its own ashes. The climax of Orozco's entire vision, a vision forged in revolution, conquest, war, fire, intellect, and struggle. In this burning man, we see echoes of Mexico's past, the indigenous world raised but never erased, the colonial crucible where gods were shattered and rebuilt in stone, the revolutions, the blood, the never-ending flame of change. But it also speaks to all of us, the modern soul, scorched by industry, haunted by progress, and still searching for meaning. Orozco offers no easy answers here as we lay back and look into this incredible cupola. There's no triumph, no peace, only the truth that to rise, we must first burn. As you stand or lie beneath this dome, your head tilted back, your breath held, you don't just look at the man in flames, you truly feel him. Because in that moment, in the light, in that fire, he is you. Thank you so much for coming along with me on this incredible journey into what I feel is the Sistine Chapel of the Americas, one of the greatest art experiences you'll ever have in your life, because it combines elements of the beautiful history of European art with that American and Mexican revolutionary spirit and a modern look into our soul. I'm Toby Nomad. You can see so many other great art, museum, and adventure travels here on my channel. Click subscribe if you want to be the first to know about it. Hit a like if you really enjoyed this video, and be sure to ask me any questions and leave any comments that you have in the comment section. If you're as fascinated as I am by art and history, and if you particularly like Mexican art and history, you can check out 2 other videos that I did that are doing really well, are quite interesting. One of them, you get to see the Mona Lisa of Mexico, the painting by the most famous Mexican artist. You've probably heard of her, but this one is really great, and you can take a look at the painting itself and my description of it and my experience of it at the Museum of Modern Art in Mexico City. Another video, if you like this one, you'll probably love, is the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. It's one of the greatest museums in the Americas, probably the entire world. It has a collection of objects, artifacts, statues, blood receptacles, ball courts, everything you could imagine from these fantastic Mexican cultures prior to European colonization. You get to see them all there, and I explain them all in detail in this video. I can't wait to see you around in another one of these. I'm Toby Nomad. See you in just a second. Click here.